So I'm going to start. Here we go. So I will introduce you. I'll introduce the show and you, and I don't know. I'll be organic about the questions, okay?
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
Here goes. So welcome to another episode of Awakened Soul Stories. We have two amazing guests today, not just one, but two. They just happen to be husband and wife, Marilyn and Steve Reel. So we met maybe 3 years ago at a networking group that we both all belong to. And Marilyn at the time was doing photography for her menagerie boudoir photographs that she does. And she brought that to the business. And she also brought Steve in, and Steve does all the stuff behind the scenes. But they're a lot more than that. They also, I don't know, I consider them homesteaders, I would say. They grow their own food. They make their own food. They make jams and jellies, and I think there was some maple syrup sitting on a fence in a post that I saw. So there's a lot of different things. So I wanted them to talk to the audience today about, how to be self-sufficient, how to survive on your own. And, I think it's important because if you really look at the way things are going right now in the world, that may be coming sooner than later. So without further ado, Steve and Marilyn. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for inviting us to share some time with you today. It has been a crazy ride the last few years. And I think more and more people are realizing that they need ways to deal with the challenges and the stresses that are going on in life right now. And I think a lot of what we do and what we share with other people when we do classes and whatnot, and our videos, is how to do things that are going to help you kind of rely on yourself a little bit more, take some of the stress out of worry with, food prices and availabilibilities, and be able to get back to the things that our grandparents and great-grandparents used to do.
That sounds like it sounds like, I know it's a lot of work, and I've watched you guys in action, but I think it's pretty impressive because you really have to persevere. It's not, nobody goes into this thinking they're just going to get it in the first week. And Steve, when we were talking the other day, you made that perfectly clear, and that's kind of the illusion. Even though you two make it seem so simple, it's not. But before we even talk about that, I want to really delve into how you transitioned from corporate America to homesteading. Let's go there for a minute.
Okay, I think for both of us, the transition was something that we made the decision based on how dealing with corporate America, the stresses, the pressures, was taking its toll on us emotionally and physically. We realized that the change to doing something that we loved, to doing something that made more of a difference than just being part of the corporate environment, was important. It not only let us feel better about what we were doing every day mentally, but it removed that stress that you get when you're in a corporate environment that you can't avoid.
Yeah. We were both raised by Depression era parents. And although that's how we live our life, that's one thing that we strove for, was always to succeed in business. My parents always pushed a very strong work ethic. And I think because we worked corporate, because that's what paid the bills, and we felt somewhat successful by what we did, but it wasn't who we were. So I don't think either of us really cared for the work that we did. We only did it because it was a sign of success and how we made our income and paid the bills.
Yeah, so I think for me in particular, it was letting go of some of society's expectations and realizing that being true to yourself and understanding what it is that makes you happy was a big move. For me to leave a very good paying corporate job to start my own business, even though it was something that I had a strong passion for and that I felt made a difference to other people, was something that was a strong, strong challenge. And for most people, the guilt that comes with leaving what society expects you to do, along with the worry about finances, it's a big deterrent for people to leave their corporate environment to do something different. And for us, that was a real kick to get us moving a little bit stronger towards the homesteading and self-sufficiency area, because when you don't have that financial cushion, you have to become more creative in what you do. And both of us having that background made it a lot easier for us to do that transition. I think the biggest thing people look at is they think a lot of these things are hobbies, and it's not. It's actually a lifestyle. It's something you have to knowingly accept the fact that there's going to be a lot of hard work. There's going to be a lot of times where you have to maybe give up some of the things that you did previously. If you don't have the finances to do it, you have to make a choice on what's really the most important thing. And for us, that was becoming self-reliant, having more confidence in what we did. Even if we had to go out and learn something new, like you said, with the maple syrup, this was our first year collecting maple syrup, but you can't be afraid to take that step to try something new, because if you fail, it just means try again, get some more knowledge, get some more practice, and keep going.
Right. Wow. So that's a lesson, obviously, that, is hard earned, I would think. Now, again, what made you get into the photography end of things?
I've always liked photography. My camera was my companion when I was much younger. And then my daughter got into modeling and needed headshots done. So I started doing photography more with her. And then we had other people who wanted headshots done. And it was more as a favor to start with. And I was still working a full-time IT management position and doing all that. When making the decision to get into it full-time really came from the stresses that I was experiencing in corporate work. I needed to do something different. And the first time I did a session on a weekend when I wasn't at work, and I had a client who saw her photos and cried, that was the difference. That let me know where I was doing something that had real impact and importance, as opposed to what I was doing in the corporate environment, which was working for somebody else, doing the things that were expected, going to work every day, hating what I did. By the end of 22 years of that, I needed something different, and being able to find something that emotionally connected with someone, that was the real switch that kind of turned that light on in my head.
Now, Steve, did you get involved in that too because of the same reasons, or were your reasons a little different?
Well, I also come from a fairly media-based background. I worked a lot on the computer side. I worked with photographers, and I was always more on, I would say, like the touch-ups and the editing side of photography. When Marilyn started the studio, before she went exclusively women's portraiture, I was involved in the shoots as well, as far as setting up lighting, creating sets, and working with the clients. When she went to women portraiture, I kind of backed away from the studio side of it because it just made people feel a lot more comfortable knowing that it was an all-girls team, an all-girls day. They could be a lot more comfortable, be themselves, and it really helped pump the whole empowerment and confidence boosting of Marilyn's photography. At the end of the day, it was a bunch of girls having a great time and feeling really good about themselves. I worked more on the back side of that. I used a lot of my programming skills from back when I was corporate to help set up the business, to maintain the web pages, and to help with the photo editing and things like that. So I'm partially retired from the photography business, but I help out where Marilyn doesn't have a whole lot of free time. She spends a lot of her time in the studio working with clients, and I do more of the administrative stuff.
So Marilyn, why boudoir photography?
I don't think it was necessarily boudoir photography only. We do a lot of, I would say, more just women's portraiture, whether it's pinup or it's fitness or it's boudoir,
Fashion.
But boudoir photography in and of itself lets a woman reconnect with that feminine side of herself that very often gets pushed to the back, especially if you're a busy mom and you may be taking care of aging parents, you've got young kids, you may be working a full-time out of the house job as well as your full-time in the house job. And who you are and that part of you very often gets pushed to the back and gets forgotten about. And 2 or 3 kids later, or you've been in a very bad relationship that has really just crushed your self-confidence. It's a way for somebody to, and it's not about physical exposure because we don't do nudes. It's more about an emotional exposure for someone to let themselves open themselves back up, re-see themselves through the eyes of the people who care about them, and realize that they're beautiful today, so they can let go of the things in the past, concentrate on the fact that they love themselves as they are today, to move forward to do whatever it is they want to do in the future.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. I mean, your work is absolutely beautiful.
It's not about the pictures, it's really about the experience.
Yeah, and I can speak from personal experience. I didn't do the boudoir part of it, but we did headshots, and it was interesting and it was fun. I was super uncomfortable going in because I don't like my picture taken, but you guys made it, very relaxing and fun, and we laughed, and it was good. So, I appreciate what you do for sure. I do.
Thank you.
And I've seen that you've empowered a lot of women to look at themselves in a different way, which I think is important, during the time that we're in now. Everybody's so, like you said, so stressed out, and, you don't necessarily think you're attractive, and until Marilyn takes your picture, and then you realize, wow, I'm almost beautiful.
You are beautiful. And I tell clients that it's not about meeting what society says is beautiful. It's about recognizing that each person has their own beauty and that it shows differently. And that once you accept and see that in yourself, it becomes even more obvious. When you talk to somebody who loves you and they tell you you're beautiful and you go, yeah, you're saying that because you have to. And then you get to see photos of yourself through the eyes of someone else. When I take the photo, I'm seeing the beauty in you and just letting that reflect back for you to see it yourself. You know, it's not about changing who someone is. It's not about disguising who they are. It's about letting that innate beauty that they have shine through for them to see.
I think that's really important. You're empowering women, right? You're
Yep.
empowering women, and you know, kind of that's what the show is about. It's not necessarily about empowering just women, but people, you know, and awakening them to different and better ideas, and helping the world to heal itself. And that shows up in many different ways. And you know, you guys have two of those corners covered with, you know, what we were just talking about was the photography and all of that, and how it helps people feel better about themselves and see themselves in a different, through a different lens, so to speak, no pun intended. And the other part of what you do, obviously, is, you know, we should talk about the homesteading and how that began, really how it began, and what you were doing in the beginning as opposed to now, because I see you've added a whole bunch of other things. You've added videos to it, and you know, it makes me laugh every time I go on and there's a new video. There's Marilyn talking away. I love it. I think it's great what you do. So, so to talk a little bit about that.
Well, that was almost accidental. That's what we do outside of work. It's just how we live our lives. And we had people approach us and say, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And we decided one day that most of what we learned was handed down to us generationally, either from grandparents or from our parents. And what we've retained from what they've showed us is how we live our lives. And we were talking one day about, it's a shame the amount of information that we either didn't pay attention to when grandma was trying to tell us something, or what we forgot and what's been lost over time because it just isn't documented. So we decided to start documenting things. We started foraging, taking pictures of plants, writing down what they're good for, whether they're edible, poisonous, medicinal. And we started writing all this down and creating kind of like a binder for, you know, to be handed down to the kids. And then somebody said, you know, rather than putting it in a book, wouldn't it be great just to make videos, put them out on YouTube? And that way, anybody, not just people who can get their hands on this book, but anybody can see how you do it. And the grandkids were more likely to watch a video than they would be to read through old notebooks. So we started putting videos together and incorporating cute little things, little dinosaurs running around in the background, or one of our cats would show up in a video and we'd have a little word bubble come off of him like he's talking. And we were making videos really for the grandkids to watch and see what grandma and grandpa do when we're not at work. And we started getting comments on the videos, and we had other people approach us saying that they were interested and they wanted more. And we didn't realize how many people would be, you know, interested in learning what we knew. We didn't think it was special. We just figured it was the way we lived. But it seemed to be kind of a popular thing, or becoming a popular thing. So we started making more and more videos, and most of the videos we make are either what we could remember to hold a camera in front of what we're doing, which is, I think, the hardest part for us, is remembering to record what we're doing.
Yeah, when I was growing up, my parents were both born in the 1920s and lived through the Depression. My dad was in World War II. They went through all that time frame, and they both grew up on farms. So for me, that was kind of a part of my life from a young age. I used to spend some time during the summers on a hay rake behind a tractor, doing making the furrows for hay so they could come along with a pitchfork and pitch it up onto the truck, because we didn't have a baler. So for me, this is stuff that I've done for a long time. I was part of 4-H growing up, which I think is great for kids, give them that hands-on knowledge. For me, being part of that opened up a lot of doors. I was able to learn public speaking. I learned how to sew. I learned how to cook. I learned how to do food preserving. I grew up with family gardens that you did preserving every year. It was part of what you did. You went berry picking and you made jams and you made syrups, and my background held that. And being able to get back to that, I mean, I think at some point for most people in your life, you kind of take a step away from a lot of things you did growing up because you're trying to figure out who you are. You want to get out into that big, awesome world, check everything out, get involved, become your own person. And then later in life, you realize the importance of the things that you learned when you were younger. But we all have to go through that stage that lets us kind of expand our own personality, figure out who we are. I think a lot of what is lost now is with all the technology and our reliance on that, we don't spend any time teaching the basic skills anymore.
Right. True. Kids don't learn it in school and parents don't have time to teach it. So, so that's why it's, I guess, more importantly, why it's nice to have people like you who can bring that back to the forefront. You know, I think it's important. How do you feel about, do you think we're going to need it sooner than later? What do you think?
I think you could always use it.
Mhm.
And the beauty of self-reliance, just being, which doesn't mean that you shun help and you won't take, help or assistance from other people. It just means that in a pinch, for instance, if Marilyn was sick, I wouldn't expect her to get up and clean the house and make dinner. And we both know how to do the same jobs at the house, because if one person's unable to, you should be able to. I should be able to sew my own button on a shirt if I lose it. Those are all really basic skills that everyone really needs to know. That's what self-reliance is. And the other beauty is you can feel good about yourself when you accomplish something. It's not like just doing another job. It's doing a job and then feeling really good about it because you did it. There are jobs that we hire out because, I'm not going to do certain plumbing jobs, so I'm going to hire somebody who's an expert in that field. But if it's a small job, we'll definitely try to do it ourselves. It's a learning experience. It's something you can put under your belt and feel good about doing yourself.
Right. Not to mention the fact that it's very economical, because it cuts your, that's the other thing, it cuts your grocery bill down. I remember in the beginning, you guys were shopping, once every 6 months or something like that?
It cuts back on everything. It cuts back on our bills, our garbage. We put maybe a small shopping bag of garbage out every week. Our recycling is cut way back. A lot of it's cut back because we're purchasing less and making a lot of our own as far as food and household products. We use reusable dish rags rather than paper towels. Personally, I use a handkerchief instead of Kleenex. They're just little things that in your life, once you start doing and it just becomes a habit, you don't really think twice about it until you start putting it down on paper and you see how much you're saving and not just monetarily, but how much you're saving even the planet.
Right. Carbon footprint, right?
Yeah. And I think right now, if the last few years have taught us anything, nothing is guaranteed.
Right.
Being able to know that you can handle a life-changing event. And that might be somebody loses a job. It might be somebody gets sick or passes away.
Could be a house fire.
Unexpectedly. Could be a house fire. It could be, something big. With everything that's going on in the world, you just don't know what could happen tomorrow. And knowing that you can handle that on your own and that you're prepared for it takes a lot of that anxiety and stress away.
It's insurance. You buy insurance for your car and for your home, not because you want something bad to happen, but because if something does happen, you'll be prepared. You have insurance to cover that. So putting back, let's say, a few months or even a year or more of food that you grow in your garden, or even that you purchase at the store but preserve, is insurance. Because if you do lose a job and you can't afford to go shopping, or something in the world happens where it's difficult to find something to put into your pantry, you have it already put back. It's insurance. And the difference between that and regular insurance is if I need it, great. And if I don't need it, I can still eat it. It's not wasted. It's just something that's put back as a just in case.
Yeah. And prices, I mean, history shows us prices go up. Prices very rarely go back down.
Right.
Something that you invest in today is going to cost less normally than something you're investing in 3 months. So being able to have that confidence and that self-reliance of being able to know if something major happened. Our business, our photography business, was closed for 4 months 2 years ago. And when you don't have income coming in, but you still have bills to pay and food to buy, it's nice to know that you've got some of that covered and you don't have to worry about it.
Right. Food's expensive.
It is. And
Yeah.
4 months worth of bills is not something most people have money put aside.
No, they don't.
But it's funny, you know, COVID came, we were basically shut in, weren't able to run our business, but both of us were completely stress-free, knowing that we had more than enough food put back, we had enough money in our savings, that we didn't have anything to worry about. And then when it ended, we opened business as usual and got back on with our regular life.
But we used that as an opportunity to learn. I think a lot of times when stressful situations happen, or situations that aren't what most people would consider a positive, you can learn from it and find a way to take advantage of the lessons that you've learned and move yourself another step ahead, so that if that were to happen again, you have less things to deal with or less things to worry about. So for us, big thing at that point was, okay, well, what do we have for bills that we don't want to have hanging over our head? Let's get those paid off. What did we have gaps in for maybe things we had supplies of that we then had to go out and try to get at the store? And being able to look at that and expand on what you have, or expand on what you know. Learning new skills is a big one. You can learn new skills without necessarily having to pay money for it.
Right.
There's YouTube videos everywhere. You can still go to a library and pick up a book and read it and learn things.
But getting your hands dirty is very important. You could read books and you can watch videos and you could have a lot of information, but if you never actually practice or do those things, you really don't know how to do them. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to try it, and in some cases practice over and over until you feel comfortable with it.
Right.
Foraging is a big thing with us. We like to go off into the woods and around the yard. I call it picking the weeds, and finding different plants or mushrooms that we can use either as an edible or medicinally, and then being able to make tinctures or salves with what we find. Passing that information on is going to be fairly important. When you call, or when you have a situation at home and like a bee bite or a cut, knowing what you can use that's just growing in your backyard to help with something simple like that is handy. But even more so if you had a bigger problem and you were unable to just dial 911 and have an ambulance show up and bring you to the hospital, knowing how you can protect yourself, or at least do that primary care before help gets there or until a doctor can see the problem. Not saying that everyone should go out and get CPR training, but it doesn't hurt. Knowing how to administer certain
First aid.
first aid,
Basics.
or putting a splint on, or making sure somebody can breathe. You know, you hear stories about how some little kid gave dad some aspirin because he was having a heart attack, and it was what kept him alive until the paramedics could get there.
Right.
Knowing simple little things like that is very, very important.
Yeah.
And
I would say so.
a lot of that is lost. They don't teach it in school. We used to have home ec and simple classes like that they would teach in school. They don't teach it anymore. And I think we've gone enough generations now where parents today were never taught that. So they don't even teach their kids because they don't know.
They have no
We're
idea.
with a lot of people who ask us to do speaking engagements or to put videos together, they just don't know, and they weren't taught, and their parents didn't know. And it's all history that's getting lost. And so this is a way of preserving history as well.
Yeah. So for me, having parents who went through the Depression and World War II, there were a ton of lessons to learn from that. And a lot of that has been forgotten because it's been so long and we've come so far with technology. Being able to go back and recognize things that have happened in the past in history, take the knowledge and the skills that people had then and be able to implement them now if they're needed. At victory gardens, that's been kind of a popular phrase this year.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been TV shows called The Victory Garden. The whole purpose behind that was because there wasn't the food to feed the people and the military. And you needed to do that as part of your survival, your daily, what you did. You were on rations. And if you're on rations, you only get a little bit and you need to supplement that with something. So being able, somebody doesn't have to grow a huge garden to make a difference.
Right. But if everyone had a small garden, it would make a huge difference. It's the number of people that get involved. You can't grow everything that you buy at the grocery store, but if you grew a portion of that and your neighbor grew a portion and their neighbor grew a portion, and somebody did animal husbandry where they had a small farm, maybe one person had cows, one person had chickens. If everyone on your street participated, you would have more than enough to keep everyone going.
Right.
But people don't know their neighbors anymore.
Yeah.
No, it's funny that you say that about the community, because there's a community in Abu Dhabi that's a green community, and it's in the middle of this big metropolitan city, but it's neighbors, tons of neighbors, and they grow their own food and they exchange food with each other, so they don't have to go outside of their bubble to buy supplies. It's pretty amazing. Everything's green, everything's recycled. Even the buildings are built from recycled materials. There's a lot of, look it up. There's a lot of interesting things there. I was shocked because you don't know what you don't know until you find out you didn't know, right?
Right.
Somebody had brought it to my attention, and I thought it was pretty interesting.
I mean, there's,
Go ahead.
it said one of the byproducts of becoming more self-reliant was we actually reduced the amount of waste that we were producing. So there are a lot of positives, but it also can take time.
Right.
The whole thing that it's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight.
It doesn't happen overnight. You know, most people aren't going to go out and buy a year's worth of food and then say, okay, I'm good, especially not at prices the way they are.
Right, right.
But making a small change here and a small change there suddenly becomes a much bigger change. One of the things that I like to tell people is if you make do one extra thing a day,
Mhm.
at the end of the month, you've done 30 extra things. At the end of the year, you've done 365 extra things. Even if it's something small, it adds up to something so much bigger by the time you get there.
Mhm.
That's true. That's
Yep.
very, that's some good advice. Now, how did you set up your growing space in your yard? Because I know you keep adding to it, so let's talk about that a little bit.
It's been years of just different experiments with the spaces that we have until you get comfortable with a particular style. I don't think any one way of growing food is far superior to any other. It's really what you're comfortable with, the amount of space you have,
Right.
and the type of food that you're growing. We do a lot of raised bed gardening. We have a hugel culture mound. We have an orchard. We've dabbled with aquaponics. We've done a little bit of everything. When it comes to what we grow what we eat. We don't really mess with that too much. If we eat potatoes, we grow our favorite type of potatoes. If we eat peppers, we eat the peppers that we eat. That's what we grow. We don't really dabble with a lot of exotics or odd plants because it's a waste of space for us.
Yeah.
So we know we grow what our staples are. And then we always review our pantry at the beginning of the year in the spring, and we find out what we're running low on and what we still have kind of a surplus of. So when we plan our garden, we plan the garden around what we're using more of, is what we're going to grow more of, and what we seem to have a surplus of, we either grow less or we just skip it for that year. That way we're always maintaining kind of a stock, a par level of what we normally use in our recipes.
Yep. And we've changed the way that we garden over the years quite a bit as well. About 12 years ago or so, we had, I think the only vegetable garden space we had at one point was we had a small 3 foot by 3 foot raised bed, and we were practicing square foot gardening. So we had 9 little patches, and it was amazing how much we got out of that little 3 foot by 3 foot square. It was because at the time, the area that's now our garden was all being prepped for our wedding. And it was like, not going to mess with it. We had flowers and bushes and trees and plants, and it was all done up for that specific purpose.
Yeah. At the same time, we were growing aquaponically in the basement of our home over the winter. So that way we had fresh vegetables all year round. So in the winter, we were still picking tomatoes and peppers and salad greens.
But for us, it grows and it changes every year. You find what works, you find what doesn't work.
Yeah.
We've raised chickens. Our chickens all passed away. We decided to kind of take a break because that was when the studio was getting off the ground, and we were super, super busy and had some issues with the chickens we had, with health issues with the chickens. Didn't really want to deal with that again. But it's something that comes full circle. When you're ready, if you want to do it again, you can. But we learned a lot from that first time around on what we would change, what we would do differently. And for us, garden beds are the same. We tried doing arches with cattle panels. Worked awesome for doing things that vine and climb. And we're going to add some more of those this year. We've been transitioning. We did a lot of wooden raised beds. And over time, wood rots and wood prices went through the roof for a while. And we're not getting any younger. So we rethought what we wanted to do, decided to go with a cinder block raised bed. And each year we can add a row on top to make it taller, so that when we're at the age where it's harder for us to bend over to get into weed, to do those things, the raised beds are going to be higher. But yet we're not putting all the cost in at once. We're kind of working our way through it. Our goal this year is to add an outdoor kitchen. So that's going to be a whole nother piece to the puzzle that we're looking forward to doing, but it's going to give us more options on things that we can do. I can do some canning outdoors. We can do our maple syrup boil off outdoors. A lot of things that right now can be very inconvenient to do in the house, especially in the summer when it's 80 degrees out and your house is now over 100 degrees because you're boiling water all day.
Mm-hmm. We're also going to be putting in a root cellar because right now we store a lot of our root type produce, potatoes, carrots, onions, squash. All of that is currently in a store that we use kind of as our pantry, but maintaining the humidity for one thing is detrimental for something else. So we'd like to have an exclusive root cellar. So I'm in the process now. I started last year of digging that, but we're going to have that built out this year as well. Wow. So that we have to store all of our roots as well.
You guys are ambitious.
It's what we don't go out. So that's a savings.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love being unplugged. And because what we do for a living is involves so much technology at the end of the day, going outside, working in a garden, working with your hands and getting dirty, it's not work for us. It's almost a way of escaping the technology that's in our work. It's relaxing. And then when you're finished with a project, you can stand back, look at it, and feel really good about yourself because you just accomplished something.
Yes. Now, are you trading foods with anybody, or is this just for you and your family?
Well, in the family and with our immediate neighbors.
Yeah, we have neighbors who grow things different than we do, who are also, they're hunters. I mean, we're vegetarians, so we don't do the hunting thing. But when he goes hunting, if he finds some maitake mushrooms or chicken of the woods, he'll collect them, drop them off at our house. And we don't mind freeze drying some and giving them back to him in trade.
Right.
We also, we gave him a few dozen canned items for Christmas. We give him Victoria sauce and a lot of oddball things that we grow in our garden that he doesn't, and he trades with us different types of hot peppers and things that we don't grow, but he does. So everybody gets a little bit of everything. One of our other neighbors has chickens and they have eggs, and they'll plow our driveway, and we do favors for them as well. The other neighbor was clearing his driveway, knew we needed dirt for fill, and he dropped off
like 8 truckloads
of dirt that we could use. Right. And that's the whole point. We try to exchange as little money with our neighbors as possible. If we can do each other favors or barter with different things that you grow, that's always a plus. We are doing maple syrup this year, not because we love maple syrup. Well, I think we do, but we're not going to use as much as we actually make. We're doing it because our neighbors don't. And that's one more thing that we have that we can offer to them that they don't need to waste their time doing.
Right.
We try to find things that are unique within our community That way we can share it with people. It'll free them up from having to do those things. And then what it is that they specialize in, they can share with us.
And we did that when we had the chickens. We had a number of neighbors who were elderly and on a fixed income. So we would drop off a dozen or 2 dozen eggs every week.
Our chickens produced a lot more than we would ever use. And
Right.
we weren't in the business of selling eggs. We don't do farmers markets. So anything over what we would use would either get preserved or it would go to our neighbors or
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, so that we can help them reduce their bill by at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And, you know, they may not be able to physically or financially do something, but they're all, you know, for them, they were always keeping an eye on the house. They knew who came and went. If there was any issues or questions, they were kind of like your in-person security camera. You always knew what was going on.
They also had great knowledge. Listening to people who lived, 20, 30, 40, 50 years before you did, it's funny how much you have similar, how many things are the same, but not.
Right.
Finding they did things in the past and learning from the times that they grew up in really helps out with us. When we say we cut back on the amount of garbage we produce, garbage really things that you put in the trash, you have to go outside of your bubble, outside of your house, purchase something, bring it home, and usually what you're throwing away is the packaging that it came in.
Right.
So if you can eliminate that package by either producing your own food or getting it from a neighbor, you're not throwing anything away. And then any scraps from vegetables or eggshells, all of that goes into our compost and it's used towards our gardens. So anything that we can compost, we compost.
So you do your own composting. That's
At the
ingenious.
price of fertilizer these days,
Yeah.
it's
I
a
can
great turn.
So,
Yeah. And we also, to reduce waste, we not only do we do canning, but we dehydrate and we freeze dry foods that if you've got grapes that aren't going to get finished in the fridge, instead of throwing them away, you can dehydrate them and turn them into raisins. Or you can take
Milk that's going bad and turn it into
farmer's
cheese
cheese.
or yogurt or sour cream.
Yeah. So understanding the way years past, you did not waste anything because you didn't have enough to waste.
right.
Our society is a very wasteful society, and understanding what you can do to eliminate that waste not only saves you money, but it puts less in the trash and in the landfills, and it has a domino effect.
It would seem that way. So, I want to, because I know we've talked about this before, but you really started getting into the video aspect of teaching people things when you did the pine needle tea video. Yeah. So can you talk about that a little bit and how many, people actually watched your video?
Yeah, I think we're up to close to 17,000 people who've watched that video. For us, making the pine needle tea video, we did because it's something that you can forage and collect.
Something simple that the grandkids could follow along with.
And it's very high in vitamin C. So if you're not going out and buying, we can't raise oranges in our area. So it's not like you're going to go out and pick citrus fruits from the trees to get that. So it was just another way to be able to increase your vitamin C intake. We also use it as one of the ingredients in our winter cold and flu tea that we've also done a video about. And for us, it was fun to share how we did it. And it's not something that you have to invest the time in planting and growing. It's something that
it's very
grows.
simple. You can just go out and any time of the year, We prefer picking pine tips for medicinal purposes early in the spring when they're first coming out. But as far as pine needle tea goes, you can pick pine needles whenever and just steep them in water and make a tea out of it. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's something everyone has access to. It's a trail tip. Anybody who would go hiking or camping, rather than just drinking water, it was a way of flavoring water. And we didn't think much of it when we made the video, as just something kind of cool that you can do. And then come to find out, people were using pine needle tea to help with some of the effects of COVID. And I think that's why the video ended up going nuts. The video was out there for a year or more, and I don't think more than a handful of people watched it. And then all of a sudden it just exploded.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Sometimes when you think the information you have isn't really that important, there may be a day that it is, and without you even knowing it.
So did you get people that like tried to contact you because of that?
Yeah, we had a lot of people who asked questions. They wanted clarification on what kind of trees can you harvest from, what can't you. We had people asking us if we would sell them pine needles, which we don't do. But we actually had a lot of people going, can I buy some from you? And, you know, one woman was like, well, I have some in my yard, but I don't feel like collecting them and I'd rather buy them from you. And it was like, well, that's awesome. However, we don't sell them. We're trying to teach people how to be more self-reliant and self-sufficient and understand what they can do on their own and how it can be used.
I think we gave her a link where she could go and buy them, just to put it out there for people who don't have pine trees. If they live in the city, for instance, and they wanted to try it, you can buy food grade pine needles so you can make a pine tea. But the whole point that we were trying to make is don't buy more stuff. Just go outside, learn nature, look at the plants that are out there, take a course if you need to, and just enjoy what's out there that you don't have to purchase.
Yeah, there's so many things medicinally that are growing in everybody's yards that the knowledge has been lost.
Right.
And just trying to get that knowledge back out there. Back in World War II, over in England, the pharmacies couldn't get the ingredients to make a lot of the medicines. So they actually had kids from who lived in the cities who got brought out into the country areas collecting fresh herbs. And then those herbs would get dried and sent to the pharmacies to make the medicines. So it was really the kids and the people out in the country who were gathering the items needed to make the medicines because the pharmacies couldn't import what they were importing before.
And the pharmacists would make pills or syrups, and people got very used to just taking the medicine rather than knowing what was in the medicine and maybe how to get that stuff themselves. So it's one of the things that we feel strongly about trying to pass on. We won't make a video that has anything in it that might be detrimental to somebody's health, or if it's a plant that's difficult to identify, we try to avoid that. What we'll always say in a video is that somewhere near you, there's someone who gives a class. Take a class. It has to be hands-on. Don't think that you can buy a book and go out and just positively identify plants. If it's potentially dangerous, it's not worth it.
Of course.
Learn it and you become confident in what you're picking. There's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, I can see that clearly.
And you know what you're getting.
Right.
That's true. That's true. I mean, it's smart that you don't supply it for people because they have to make that decision for themselves, right?
Yes.
There's enough. I don't know. I just think, I honestly feel like what you two do. You know, you have so much to offer the world. It's not just our little community. And I'm talking about, you know, speaking about information and processes and, you know, if somebody really wants to know how to do this, they can reach out to you, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have our YouTube channel. We also have a web page. And there's information in both places on how they can reach out to us. They can comment on a video. They can go to our web page and send us a contact form. And for us, it's about sharing the information, letting other people be able to learn something new, build their self-confidence. In reality, the more people who are self-aware, self-reliant, self-sufficient, and prepared, the easier it is for everyone else. Because if you had 1,000 new people gardening and growing as much of their own vegetables as they can, if there's a shortage at the store, the people who can't go out and do that have more available to them because you're needing less.
Mhm.
Right.
So you're helping others inadvertently when you're helping yourself.
That seems logical. Wow. But so why don't you give people the information to be able to get in contact with you? Let's put that out there.
On YouTube, it's Keeping It Real with Marilyn and Steve. And real is spelled R-I-E-L. Our webpage is keepingitreal.com. We, would love comments on things people would like to see us do videos on, or if somebody has questions about things that they'd like to see us add on our webpage. We'd love.
The webpage is fairly new. We're trying to populate it with information, but it's only done when we have free time to do it. And the problem with our videos is we're not really from the generation of walking around with a camera in front of you all the time. So it's very difficult for us to film what we do on every day. I know I was repairing some stools today, and Marilyn said, why don't you take some pictures of before and after, or maybe do a video of it? And I'm thinking, well, nobody really wants to watch me fix a couple of stools. We're not sure what to video, when to video, and setting up a camera is almost, we have to get past not filming what we do. And then once we've filmed it, we can decide whether or not to upload it. The problem is when we go, we should have filmed that. That would have been a great thing to put on YouTube. Too late.
Yeah, and the other thing, sometimes when times are super, super busy, it can take you 8 hours of time invested if you're going to make a video on something that you could have done and completed in less than an hour.
Without the camera.
Without a camera. So sometimes it's necessity comes before filming things for YouTube.
Yeah, we're not professional YouTubers. We don't make an income doing it.
No.
If this is what we did for a job, we'd probably have cameras in front of us at all times. But it's a kind of an afterthought for us. And originally, like I was saying, it's what do we want to teach the grandkids? If we would think about it, we'd come up with a subject and we'd set up a camera and we'd record us working in the garden or working in the yard. But now we know that more people want to see a lot of what we do on a regular day-to-day, and we're trying to learn how to record that.
Yeah, and people can also, if they want to see more, they can follow us on Instagram for Keeping It Real. They can follow us on Facebook with Keeping It Real as well. We do a lot more quick little posts on Instagram or Facebook because it's easy to just take a snapshot or a tiny little 15-second video than it is to record a whole YouTube video. So following on either of those platforms as well, you're going to get to see more of what we do on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, our time is up. So I just want to thank you for agreeing to do this. See, Steve, it wasn't so bad, right? You did great.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to get, people that are contributing to changing the world and awakening human beings. And, you two are definitely part of that. And I believe that's why you were put in my path. So we help each other, and I like that. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thank you.
You're welcome. Just hold on, okay? I'm going to stop recording.